So let's talk a little bit about exposure, and I'm just going to use the regular camera app for right now. And so, of course, if we're trying to frame something up, right, the camera's going to want to constantly like rearrange and shift and change and decide, what is it focusing on and what's it not focusing on. And so if we want to start to gain a little bit of control, the easiest thing to do is just, obviously we can touch the screen and that then like sets where the focus is. But notice as soon as I like move the camera, it's going to like shift and change again. It's going to kind of fluctuate. Now it's focusing on the back instead of the front, and it keeps moving around. So if I want to ensure that it's going to stay where I want the focus, what I can do is click and hold. So if I go like this, you'll see there's a little yellow box and goes boink, boink. And then that locks the exposure. And it's AE and AF lock, which means it's an auto exposure and auto focus. So both the exposure and the focus are going to stay set. So it won't switch back to that background again, And so I can always, if I get in too close, well, then it's off, but I can start to back out the camera until, okay, it's in sharp focus again. I could also do that. Let's see how close I can actually get. So it's probably as close as it'll get, but I can just back out a little bit to ensure that it's sharp. Now, the other thing I can do with this is not only the focus, right? And same thing, if I switch over to this flower here, I can again, pull back until it gets in sharp focus. So I'm not changing where the focal point is set. I'm just changing the distance of the camera. So I'm moving the camera back and forth until it looks sharp. The other thing I can do though is it also has exposure. So if I pull down, there's a little sun over here on the right hand side, and so I can also adjust the exposure. Sometimes it's just a little bit too hot and I start to lose detail in those highlights, and so then I can start to pull that down, and I can always take a picture in there. And if I switch over to this one again, I can go until it looks like it's in sharp focus. And notice, even though I move from one flower to the next, the focus is still set at that closest area, so I can even come from above and start to get that in focus. And the exposure staying set as well. Now, if I wanted to go in the other direction, let's say like I wanted to have a brighter brightness, I can get it in focus, and I can just drag this back up. So it'll kind of have a brighter background, maybe a little more saturation in those colors if I want to go for something more like that. Again, move it back and forth until it starts to look in focus. It has a tendency, when you're shooting, to having a little, going down just a little bit. Actually, the camera is a little bit hot sometimes. You can always increase the exposure inside of like Snapseed, and you'll have more success than if you are to take a picture that's too bright. If there's no detail there, you can't pull it back down. So it's kind of like the opposite of what Ansel Adams was doing. He usually would expose for the shadow, so he would want to make sure that I've got lots of detail in these shadow areas, and then he'd pull the development, lessen the amount of time that he developed it for. But in our case, that won't really work, because if we blow this out, there's not going to be a way to get that like that detail back in some of those brightest areas. We bring it way up. Now those yellows and reds are really crazy saturated, but that background, if we tried to darken it, we would never be able to pull that back out. So that's how we can adjust exposure inside of our camera.